Good afternoon, students. It's good to be with you again. I know I've been out a little bit the past couple months, but what I want to share with you today is just some lessons that I learned over the past couple months and kind of some of the life experience that I've had to deal with that this question has really comforted me, and the answers to this question have really given me a new perspective. So the message for today is called, "Why do bad things happen to good people?" And it's based on Luke 22, where Jesus is praying to God the Father in the Garden of Gethsemane. And the main reason I want to bring this message to you is because many of the statistics that we deal with as youth leaders are very sobering, that only about 4 to 5% of kids that grow up in youth group or grow up in church actually maintain their faith through their college and 20s and 30s. And that's mainly because they run into, life experience of like suffering and evil, and they're wondering, how can a good God let some of these happen? Or they run into, science and evolution and some of these other things that they have to deal with in, mainstream public colleges, and they're not equipped with the proper answers on how to deal with that. So the main reason I want to bring this message to you today is to hopefully equip you for some of these next seasons, to show you that there are really good answers, that actually Christianity has the best answer to this question. And I feel like the question, why do bad things happen to good people, is in some ways central to our experience as all of humans. So the main thing I want to do today with this question, why do bad things happen to good people, is actually ask 3 questions of this question. The first is, who are the good people? The second one is, what are the bad things? And 3 is, why do those things happen? And then I'll give you some take-homes and some takeaways. But I'm actually just going to read this passage to you, and then we'll go from there. Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, you can take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him, and being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. And the main thing I want to deal with first is look at this question, who are the good people? And I think you and I all know that almost everybody on this earth, or really everybody on this earth, makes mistakes. We're not perfect. We sin, we fall short. Sometimes we yell at our brothers and sisters, or we answer our mom and dads in ways that are disrespectful, or sometimes we do things that we're really ashamed of. But each of us knows deep down that none of us are really good. Now, the Bible has a really good balance on how we actually deal with this, and that the Bible doesn't say that everything we deal with that's bad in life is actually something we deserve, because that's pretty dark and bleak. The Bible actually has a really balanced view, and that says that injustice and suffering do exist in this world because of sin, because of the choices that Adam and Eve made. But sometimes those things are not what we deserve, and that sometimes there's injustice and things that we deal with that we don't deserve. And that doesn't mean that God doesn't love us or that we're bad people, but it's just sometimes the fact of life. So I think we'd all answer this question, are we good, with, well, no, not really. I think the second question that's really interesting is Jesus good? When we look at the biblical text and we look at the life of Jesus, we see that he was a perfect man, that he did not sin once, that he was fully God and fully man, but that he was perfect and he never sinned. And so when we bring this question, why do bad things happen, in some ways to Jesus, it makes the question a lot different. So that's kind of the comparison and contrast I wanted to show you guys between Jesus and us. The second thing I want to deal with, and this is more of where I want to spend a little bit of time today, is what are the bad things? And so I think we would all say that as we've dealt with perhaps, moms and dads either divorcing or, relationships with our siblings or somebody dying, that some of the most painful things we deal with as human beings are when a relationship is separated for a little while. And I know I've had to deal with that recently in my life. It's why I haven't really been around. And that is that my little sister Jordan died back on March 25th, and she was 12 years old. So some of the most painful things we can deal with as people are when relationships separate or when relationships end, at least for a little while. And so I think that's actually a very close approximation to the biblical definition of hell. Many people think of hell as, hellfire and brimstone and all these bad things, but really the biblical definition of hell is that there's separation between people that God loves and God himself, because those people choose it. that C.S. Lewis says, who's one of my favorite authors, that the doors of hell are locked on the inside, that God is constantly in some ways pursuing us. That's why he sends his son to the earth to come get us, but that we choose our separation from him. And so the interesting parallel I want to draw with that is that on Good Friday, when Jesus is on the cross and he takes the sin of the world onto himself, you are dealing with the separation of the oldest and most loving and most beautiful relationship that has ever or will ever exist. It's the relationship of God the Father to God the Son, okay? And when you're looking at what happens on Good Friday, you're seeing a rending or a tearing of that relationship. It's the most beautiful, most intimate, most loving relationship. And that Jesus, while he's on the cross, is actually experiencing hell because of the sin that he's taking on of everything that we've done. And this is what's actually happening on Good Friday. And it's really profound when you see what's going on. So the third thing I want to get into is, so why do some of these bad things happen? And I was talking with perhaps somebody you know, Becca Chinyi, who's one of the people on staff here at Grace Community Church. We were actually talking about this at Big Stuff last year. I'm not sure how many of you were there. But one of the things we were talking about is, how does God answer prayer? And she gave me basically 5 ways that God answers prayer. I thought these were really cool, and I want to share them with you. The first one is, yes, I was just waiting for you to ask me. The second one is, yes, and more than you could even imagine. The third is, yes, but not necessarily when you think it will happen. The fourth one is, yes, but not necessarily in the way you think it will happen. And the fifth one is, when God says no to us, he's only saying no because he loves us too much. He's not going to give us something that's going to actively hurt us. And so sometimes when God says no to us, actually every single time that God says no, it's because that he's giving us exactly what we would have asked for if we had all the information that he did. And actually that's a quote from Tim Keller. So, but what I want to kind of analyze is this last one. So, no, because I love you too much doesn't really work for Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. If you remember in the garden, as we just read in the passage, Jesus prays to the Father and he says, Father, let this cup pass from me, but not what I will, but what you will. And when God says no to him, because Jesus actually does go to the cross, so God obviously says no, he doesn't allow Jesus in some way a way out of the suffering. No, because I love you too much doesn't actually work for Jesus in the garden, but it's really profound in why it doesn't work, and it's so cool. So obviously God the Father loves God the Son, but the main reason why God says no to Jesus in the garden is because he loves us too much. Like both Jesus and God the Father love us too much. And that's why in John 3:16 it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. So really what we need to do is we need to reformulate no, because I love you too much, typically how God answers us in prayer, to when he's talking in the garden to Jesus, it's, no, I'm not going to let you out of the cross because you and I both love them too much, okay? It's really the ultimate answer for why do bad things happen to Jesus is Hebrews 12:2, that for the joy, you and I, for the joy set before him, Jesus endured the cross, scorning its shame, okay? And so what we really need to do with this question of why do bad things happen to good people is we need to reformulate it as, why does hell happen to Jesus, okay? And when we look at why hell happens to Jesus, why does the separation of this infinitely loving and beautiful relationship happen, is because so that good things can happen to bad people, okay? I want to say that again because I want you guys to get this. The biblical answer to the question, why do bad things happen to good people, or why does hell happen to Jesus, is so that good things can happen to bad people, so that the best things can happen to sinners, so that we can be made sons and daughters of God, and so that heaven can happen to any of us who believe, okay? And the one last thing I want you to take away from this message is just kind of this summation, okay? That when Jesus is on the cross and God says no to him in the Garden of Gethsemane, the reason that bad things happen to Jesus, that the reason this question that's sometimes at the center of so much of human experience and that's so powerful, like we run into either our little brothers dying or our little sisters dying or so many other things that we deal with, as has happened in my life. Why do bad things happen to us? When we take this question, we look at it through the lens of the life of Christ, we see that God demonstrates his love for us in a different way. And that's Romans 5:8. But God demonstrates his love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So I want you guys, as you guys go forward into whatever walks of life you're going to go into, high school, college, anything you guys run into, and when you deal with suffering in your own life, when you deal with this question of why did bad things happen to me, you can look back at this answer, that the ultimate biblical answer to why do bad things happen to good people is so that good things can happen to bad people. Why does hell happen to Christ? So that heaven can happen to us. I love you guys, and I hope you enjoy this.